Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Everything is Time podcast. My name is Jeremy.
My name is Ruby.
And we're just going to jump in like we normally do to whatever topic we want to talk about. And the sort of overall theme for today stems from a thought I had recently about what's normal in society and what things individuals experienced growing up that they thought was normal. But then in terms of introspection and then also comparison to other people, maybe not so much. I thought maybe we could like just start in on that and then we'll go to whatever is natural and it'll be great. So in general, were there any things like that you did as a family or even you as a person that you did that you thought were like totally fine, totally normal? And then you started comparing yourself to like how other people operated. And then you realized that, oh, this is very much not normal.
See, when I thought about this, I was like, okay, but a lot of the things that were not necessarily normal were not normal in American society. It was more like cultural things. And I was like, oh, other people like don't take off their shoes every time they go into like their house. That's a big one, right? Like we take off our shoes as soon as we like enter the house. At other people's house, I always feel so weird because like I have my shoes on, especially on carpet. Like walking on carpet with shoes on to me is just like one of the weirdest feelings. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Like,
really? Interesting.
Can I take my shoes off? Yeah, because like Asian cultures tend to take off their shoes in the house, but then like all of my like Caucasian American friends just like don't. And so it's just interesting. I mean, I don't make my friends take off their shoes in my house. Like when they come over, I'm like, you can leave them on. But like, I don't know. I think another weird thing that like, maybe this is more my mom's side of the family, right? My mom's side of the family is Mexican American. Vapor rub is like a staple if you're sick, like the flu, a cold, strep throat. They're like, put Vicks on your chest. If you have a pimple on your face, put Vicks on it. I've also heard that like if you put Vicks on like the bottom of your feet and then like put socks on, it's supposed to keep you warm. Like that's a thing. If you have like a cold or something. Vapor rub is just used in so many different ways. And other people don't really do that, I guess, unless you're like Mexican or Mexican American. I don't know. Maybe if you do that, let me know. You know.
I don't think I've ever used Vicks Vapor Rub. Like I know it exists, but I don't think I've ever used it in my entire life.
When I like went off to college, my mom gave me this like little first aid kit type of thing, and she sent me like this giant thing of Vapor Rub. She's like, "Here, if you get sick," I'm like, "Okay, thank you." Yeah.
I was like my mom with ibuprofen. She's like, here's this gallon of ibuprofen. And I'm like, I feel like if I walk into my dorm room with a gallon of ibuprofen, people are going to think I'm some sort of drug addict, but sure, it'd be great.
It's fine.
It's totally fine. You know, if anybody needs help with a headache, here you go. I have extras, I guess, even though they expire. But then that's another thing. I guess something that's weird also that my parents did. I'll make them share blame for this. I don't know. But like expiration dates in general are more like suggestions for medicine. Like they aren't actually like expiration dates. Also,
for
like
medicine?
For medicine, yeah. So like I'll go into a cabinet full of stuff, right? And I'll find like Zyrtec. And it's like, this expired in 2012. And my mom's like, it's fine. Like there's nothing it's not bad. Just take it. It'll be great. I'm like, I think I probably shouldn't. Or like medicine that they prescribe to dogs. Like if you like an antibiotic, right? Like that a dog would take, because it's the same medicine. But it's for me, it's still like in my household, she's like, oh yeah, I mean, like we have this, you know, antibiotic, but it's fine. Like it was prescribed for one of the dogs, but we'll just like cut it in half and you'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, great, cool. This weird like DIY medicine expiration date was something that happened all the time in my house and still does.
Interesting. My parents are kind of like that with certain like food items where it's like, I take out the mustard that neither one of them really eat that much. And then I'm like, this is expired. And they're like, well, that's when it's best by, Ruby. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to have it, but you go ahead. So when it comes to expiration dates, I take it like seriously. And my parents are like, give or take a month. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that's not how I like operate. So yeah.
I guess it just depends. Like canned goods and things, kind of like, well, those can probably last forever. But like if you're dealing with dairy milk, you can't be like, well, it's 2 weeks past over. Who really cares?
Right. You know, something else I found really interesting. This is not something I did, but like growing up, And especially in like private schools, right? The majority of people in my classes were like Caucasian, like American families. One thing I've noticed is this a lot of them would call adults by their first name. And like that's not something that like I was ever taught to do. Like it just seems disrespectful. Like
No, yeah. I'm reluctant even after knowing people for a long period of time. And now that like we're older, like if I went back and I saw our high school teachers, I'd probably call them by Mr. or Mrs. I don't think I'd be able to like call them by their first name because the roles have already been established.
yeah, it's just very strange to me. I could never.
Yeah, same. But yeah, I'm trying to think of other things. I will say hiking in general is something that I really enjoy now after doing it by myself. But hiking as part of like a family group was always a very weird experience for me. And I thought it was just like, that's how hiking was. And turns out, no, hikes can be great. You can just like go hike quietly and like enjoy nature. That like wasn't a thing. So both of my parents are like geology, geophysics people. And so whenever we'd go on a hike
Mhm.
when I was little, we would always like stop every 20 to 30 seconds to like look at a rock. But like I didn't want to go on hikes at all because I thought people just normally during hikes would look and inspect rocks on the ground. Turns out, not a requirement.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's all just like personal preference and just how your family operates. Like, I always found it shocking in some ways when I was younger to find out that like people, one, didn't have frequent family get-togethers, and
Mhm.
two, like didn't invite like extended family. It was just like
Yeah.
nuclear family. So that was just kind of like threw me off because my whole entire life has always been like everyone. And so when they're like, oh no, like it was just like the three of us.
That's how my family
Yeah,
was.
I thought that was it was interesting. I don't know.
I
Also,
mean,
have you done the same thing with words, like how you pronounce words, right? Like the way your parents pronounce it, and it's like not the way.
for some words, like especially because my father is from New York, so he'll say words
Mhm,
like a New Yorker will say. It's like I still say human instead of human. It's like anything that starts with like an
mhm.
HU, the H is just like not there for me. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know. What about you?
Well, because yeah, okay. My mom's side of the family once again. We would go to Miami. We take like a road trip to Miami like every summer, stay there for like 2 weeks with my aunt and uncle. So I grew up like around them saying guayaba, right? Which I later found out like 2 years ago that apparently that's not the name in English. Like all
Hmm.
my whole entire life, I was like, guayaba is how you say guava. In my mind, they're like two separate things. I don't know why, but like I never realized that it's guava and
Mhm.
guayaba were the same thing. So I'm saying guayaba to every single person I know because I was like, that's how you say it. They're like, no, 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 that's the Spanish saying of it. Like it's guava. I've been saying this wrong my whole life. Like people at Walmart, just me asking for guayaba, they're just kind of like, you mean guava?
I don't know. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, you have the whole other layer of like being exposed to words in just a different language. So I guess you could.
Yeah, because like okay, when I was talking with like a group of my friends and I was like, "Oh yeah, I hate it when people like don't put their indicator on before they're like merging into like your lane or like turning." And people are like, "Indicator?" And I'm like, they're like, "Oh, you mean blinker?" And I was like, "I've always
No,
said indicator."
I've turn indicator.
Like I don't know. Apparently, a bunch of them are like, no, blinker. And I was like,
Mhm.
they're like, that sounds so British. And I'm like, is it though? I think people use indicator here,
I
but
use
maybe
indicator. I think you can use either one.
yeah. Yeah, I mean I guess there is that added layer. Like my dad uses a lot of like British English because in India like that's what they grew up with. So like the
Right.
18 wheelers, he says like lorry for those.
Huh.
Like stuff like
Interesting.
that. I don't use that, but I'm sure there are some words where it's just like why did that sound so British? I don't know.
Interesting. Does he spell words like, capitalize with a Z or with an S?
Oh, I don't know.
These are the
I have
important
no idea.
questions. Come on now. We got to know if he's anti-Z
Uh,
or pro-Z. Or, like the
interesting.
word rumor. Like you can be rumor or you can
Uh-huh.
be rumor with a U. So I mean, like as
I
plebeian
didn't pay attention to
Americans,
spelling, just like the way he's like saying stuff.
I was just hoping there was a story where it's
Yeah.
like I entered a spelling bee at age 7 and I spelled it using British spelling and I got everything wrong. That's what I was hoping the story was going to go to.
That would be so horrible.
Wouldn't that?
me entering a spelling contest and just spelling everything the British way and them being like, this is wrong, ma'am. I'm like, sorry.
I'm trying to think. Like, we definitely were the nuclear family kind of model thing. Like, we didn't. I don't think I maybe see my cousins. It depends on what cousins you're talking about, but like the ones I see the most frequently, we'll call them the frequent cousins. Maybe twice a year.
Interesting.
And then the more distant ones, maybe once every couple years. So
Okay. So for you in this pandemic, it hasn't been like, oh, I don't get to see my family because it's not like you were seeing them a lot in the first place.
I guess there's for me maybe a more rigid line between family and extended family. I don't really lump them all into one, like I think maybe you do, just because of
Yeah,
the frequency, you know?
yeah. I mean, I used to see my family like every single month, like 20 people get together. Like there has never been a line between like nuclear and extended family. It's always just been everyone is family.
Right.
So I grew up around my cousins, around people. And like during this pandemic, I mean, I haven't seen like my family in like a year. So it's just like, that's been hard. But I don't know. There's never been a line for me. And so I think for a lot of people though, there is between like nuclear family and extended. And so I think that that's always been interesting because I don't know. I'd be like, oh, like how close are you with your cousins? Or like people always thought it was really interesting. They're like, you're gonna see your family again? And I'm like, yeah. Like I see them like once a month. They're like, there's so many of you. You're like, how often do you see your family? And I'm like, I see them a lot.
I think that's a in hindsight that's a blessing, you know. Maybe it's also just due to like proximity to people. Like I know a lot of my cousins are like we're not even remotely close in terms of the state regional kind of aspect of the United States. So I think there is
And
a
I mean, I think
blessing to that. I don't know. I don't think that being abnormal or recognizing abnormality is really necessarily even something that is restricted to a family unit. I think it's also something you can notice a lot, like when you grow up in school, you know, and sort of having to face that dynamic and where you sort of fit in, especially in the real formative years of like middle and high school, trying to find your niche, trying to find where you fit in, if you fit in. So maybe we can kind of like get into that and see if we can talk about some of the stuff we noticed because we had some similar experiences in that we went to Christian, largely white, small school in the South. But even then, I don't know if our experiences were like similar totally or not.
right. And I think that in middle school, they probably weren't. I mean, because you went to like a different middle school than me. So
Right.
I'm curious to see how your middle school years were. And like, I don't know if you had like a lot of fun in middle school. I don't know how it was for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe middle school as fun for me. I don't know. It was what it was. What did you notice? So we'll start with you because maybe yours is less layers to unravel in the onion, if you will, than mine are. What was it like for you? What did you notice? Where did you see you fit? Where did you not?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is that when you go to like small private school, like a middle school, there's only like maybe 20, 25 people in your class for like years. The thing I noticed at my middle school is that it almost became just like your grade against every other grade. So all of a sudden, it was like you were just one big group with your grade. So like we're sixth graders, we're the seventh graders, and like we're our own group.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would say I'll say my middle school, even though I went to two. But I do think defining characteristic was the grade that you're in. But I believe the number of students were like 100 or something like that. So there were like multiple sections of classes. So there was some division in that regard, but still the experience in terms of classes was largely similar until I believe seventh grade. They started splitting like math into two different things, and I want to say English maybe too into different sections. Also, if there's thunder in the background for audio listeners, not a voluntary choice, but it is what it is. Maybe perfect aura for the idea of middle school. Who knows? Where I ended up going to, it was like the defining characteristic of the school was athletics. And, you know, that wasn't me. So immediately, at least at the time, definitely not me. Just right out the gate, you sort of had to choose then like, are you going to be part of the like nerd kind of artsy kind of people? Or are you going to be part of like the more athletic jock kind of people. Naturally, did not choose the jock one, chose the nerd art kind of person because that is just.
Come on, Jeremy, you as a jock? Can you imagine?
No, because a lot of people that were jocks were like horrifically irritating. Also, I'm sorry, I'm not having some. This is gonna sound terrible. I'm not having like some middle-aged man yell at me to do like another lap around the track and field loop. Like I'm not. And no, no. I'll run it if I want to run it. But if you're gonna yell at me, pick a finger. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I think part of that process, though, like I experienced early on, the grouping of the niche between the athletic and non-athletic, it wasn't like they were equal groups in terms of like the numbers of people. I want to say 90% of people did athletics and then 10% did not. So naturally, didn't really feel as akin to everyone in the group. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like we had our small little niche of people, which I mean has its pros too, I guess.
But that sounds like almost really intense, just like too much.
It was. You know? Well, I'll give you an example. So middle school football, right, was taken super seriously. Mind you, when you look at that objectively, middle school football was taken super seriously, but it was. So like a 7th grade Jeremy weighed like 255 pounds. And so they're like, we're going to, we need this kid as like a linebacker. That's what they were trying to do. And so I'd get like coaches coming up harassing me, like, you need to join football. You should join football, which is like also, I have a history of family members who played football and their backs are all screwed because of it. So naturally I'm like, no, thank you. I'll do art instead.
That's wonderful.
Which then made some of the other students hate me too, because they're like, you're not going to do football? We need linebackers. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're asking me to be like a glorified tree stump to be like hit over and over again. I'm just going to get a paintbrush instead.
Just like the visual of you like carrying like an art, like a canvas thing and then like paint in your hand and just denying them, being like, no, I'm going to do art. And then you just like walk away is sending me.
I know, but it wasn't, I wasn't just like carrying around a paintbrush everywhere I went, but the idea was.
Sure. Yeah. I bet you had it ready to just take out when they asked you to be a linebacker. You're like, no, I'm already in art.
It's like Harry Potter, but all I have is a paintbrush, none of the superpowers.
Exactly.
So when you transitioned to high school, right? I know you went to public high school for like a day and a half, but when you ended up going to the high school,
way to put me on blast.
when you went to your eventual private high school, right? Did you notice the same kind of divides, or were they different?
There were like the same kind of divides. I think it got worse junior year. The main division that we had starting junior year was this like heavily academic division that was a concern for a lot of our class. But I don't know, like, did you just, because you arrived sophomore year of high school. So did you see any division, like same question that you asked me?
Right. I noticed there being more division sophomore year because it was prior to them sort of grouping everybody together in things like English, like they did junior year. So no, I maybe experienced the opposite in that it went from being partitioned into separate, like history classes, separate English classes, to them being like condensed into one. I don't know. Maybe I didn't experience that. Like I didn't internalize that in the same way. I don't really know, but that's interesting because we're trying to talk about niches in general. Like maybe there weren't ample opportunities because of the size and also the willingness to condense people into one conglomerate group to where people could kind of feel akin to smaller groups of people.
Well, we weren't like physically, because you're right. It wasn't like physical division because we're merged together.
That's what I'm saying. You're describing it as division. I'd say at least in physical terms, the opposite happened.
Physically, absolutely. It's not like we were divided. We were all merged together. But I think it caused more division in some ways, just like internally. It felt worse than us being just like partitioned into like different groups. I think that made no sense when I said it, but like,
right. So even the lack of physical division led to turmoil in terms of how people treated each other. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Thank you for straightening that sentence out.
No worries. It did certainly feel like by the time we graduated senior year, people were just tired of each other. And so I'm sure the combining of everything together didn't help with that.
Yeah, I think it made it more difficult leading up to graduation for a lot of people in their classes.
This is going to sound terrible. I don't know if the AP people felt it very much.
I don't think they did. Just from the people I've interacted with, like you guys always seemed really fine, and the people who I heard talking about it like, weren't people who were in AP. So it definitely affected the people who weren't in AP more. Which makes sense, you know, like.
I mean, it does, but I don't like that that's what happened. If there is this idea, which maybe I think we should also tear apart this idea of like this intellectual hierarchy that people just like want to create in school environments, it can be a very toxic thing. And then it can also make it to where you can't really
Yeah,
build any sort of relationship with other people because they think you're a certain way or, you know?
not even thank you. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was like manifestation. But I think that like the school itself, starting junior year, was a completely different vibe, and I think it was the perfect environment for like this like hierarchy of intelligence to kind of like manifest itself. And
Mm.
I don't think there was any opposition to that happening by like teachers or anything like that. I think anything, it was like the perfect environment, academically rigorous, to kind of partition people off based on that, even if it was unintentional.
I thought it was a joke. Like I thought the hierarchy of intelligence thing, when you referenced it to me, was like a meme that you were making up that people were saying.
To be fair, like no one said it in those terms besides like one specific person. It was there. It just wasn't referred to in that way. It was just kind of something that happened junior year and continued all the way through graduation.
After you mentioned this to me previously, I've been sort of rewinding and going back and trying to think about some of the stuff that happened and like the ways people interacted with other people through that lens, right? I can only speak for myself, right? But I don't really, I wasn't personally feeling like I had a preference towards interacting with certain people, but it was pretty clear that there was a preference towards people interacting with me that I think I maybe intrinsically noticed, but I figured who cares, they can not like me for whatever reason. But I think with the context you provided, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I don't think
Um,
people, it's not that people didn't like you. I genuinely
oh
think
no,
that
people
like,
did not. The administration did not like me. That's not a
okay, well,
question.
not, I'm not talking about the
I
administration.
know,
I'm talking
but
about like other students, like peers. It's not that people like peers. It's not like they didn't like you. It's just that like you had your group of people who you were constantly around and constantly interacting with, and like you weren't like the most approachable person. So like,
I believe that though because I know how terrible of a headspace I was in, and it didn't help that there were certain people I think also in the group, and maybe I'm part of this too, that didn't necessarily portray everyone in the group in the best light. I don't
and
know.
I think that there were some examples sometimes where like just by phrases or comments that were said lent more to that being true than not being true. And so then at that point, people were like, kind of, okay, well, this has to be true. And so then it just kind of like went off from there or continued in like the same way.
Yeah, I remember a conversation we were having with you were there and there was another person, I won't say who because confidentiality, right? But at like a baseball game. And they were it was someone who I didn't like talk with a lot because we just weren't in a lot of classes and stuff together. And they said something like the gist of it was like, "Oh, you're maybe not that bad." And I'm like, I've had virtually no conversations with you outside of this, so I don't know how you would think I was bad, but okay.
No, yeah, I know what you're saying. I think people had like a version of you in their head that like wasn't accurate, but at the same time, I don't think people really had you figured out at all. So, you know, they just see you like associating with this like group of people and also being like a top student, and then like those two merged together. It was just kind of like maybe I like shouldn't really just interact, you know?
How do you think on your end being, because I remember you mentioned like your approach was just being quiet. How do you think
Mhm.
that affected the way people interacted with you?
I think I was well liked. I don't think anybody had like a huge issue with me.
Yeah, I would say you were universally liked. I guess it's statistical improbability that anybody was universally liked, but for the most part, people had, I think, positive opinions. Um, Interesting. Do you think people, you mentioned about me, like they didn't really get you. Do you think people got you in high school?
No, but I think that absolutely not. But I don't think they had to. Like, I was someone who was nice and kind and was willing to listen to them like rant about things that they like
Mm-hmm.
maybe couldn't rant to because they were afraid that someone would start drama. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think I was not approachable. I think I was just someone who was like there. It's not like they got me or they didn't get me. I just think that like for them, I was like someone who wasn't really like a friend, but was just kind of like there to like listen to them, you know? I mean, I had like my friends and I had people I interacted with, but like in general, like some of the conversations I heard, I just heard because I was there.
Did you enjoy the role of being sort of like not a therapist, but like a person that people just talk to and not expect reciprocation, I guess? How do you
I
internalize
didn't
that?
mind that. If anything, I liked it because in a lot of ways it was just like I kind of knew how people really felt even if they
Mhm.
weren't acting like that in the moment. So it was a lot easier to see people for who they were. And I liked that. I didn't mind that. Also, some people just need that. And so I didn't mind being that for
So
people.
I think that's actually a niche a lot of people fall under though, is this idea of being present in high school, but being more of somebody that people talk to but don't necessarily spend the time to dig deeper into.
Like what did you see your role as in high school? Like I was someone who was there to like listen to people. What was your
It definitely changed, I will say. Like there's a clear distinction, I think, like pre-senior year and during. I'd say before my role, all I viewed it was just like do the best you can in school, try to get the most you can out of this kind of like environment, it was a toxic environment. I'll admit it got worse as time progressed, at least for me. During senior year, I almost felt like I don't want to imply that other people weren't the voice of reason, but when the administration allegedly, and I'll include that, even though it's not alleged, it was what happened. Was doing kind of like questionable things and teaching questionable things. I went after them, and like we've alluded to, I think previously. So I felt a lot of my role, other than just like trying to be a good student, was trying to stick up for like rational thought against a group of administrators. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it was weird because there's so many layers to just our senior year in general.
Yeah,
Um that was all taking place in the background for me. Like I knew that was happening, was definitely not my main focus. So
interesting. You weren't active in that, so I can't blame it for not being your focus, you know.
oh no, I had bigger things to worry about, at least personally. So then like this whole like one class that seemed ridiculous, I kind of zoned out and like studied
Oh,
during.
it wasn't just
Um
one class for me, but yeah, yeah.
oh, okay. Well, it was only like one class for me and I was like, okay, just study through it. And
hmm
then yeah.
I guess we kind of stayed on topic with niches, but I don't know, close enough. But just sort of to wrap that up and maybe I don't know, transition into our like movie and everything for the week. What advice, if you could go back to that time period, would you give yourself?
I'd probably tell myself to care less, you know.
Mhm.
Um, I think I cared a lot about like our friend group and things like that. It's not bad to care about your friends. It's not what I'm saying. But I think in
Friends.
terms of like the many like toxic situations I was in with these people, certain people just like
Yeah.
don't care a lot about it and maybe like don't do every single thing with this like group of people. Um, that would be my advice.
In terms of like what I would tell my younger self, I've mentioned it before. I don't think I would say not to fight against the administration because I think it needed to be done, even if I don't know.
Right. You'd stick by that.
I'd stick by that. I am maybe I would say like be sure to allocate more time to like certain people. The people that I'm still in contact with now, I would have allocated more time to in general. Because looking back, a lot of it seems like kind of like a waste of time.
But no, yeah, I would do the same thing. Like just maybe
Yeah.
allocate time differently. Although
Mhm.
that wouldn't have worked for me because like certain people who I thought I would still be in contact with, I'm not. So I don't know how that would have worked. That would have been honestly harder if I had allocated a lot more time to certain people and then like not get any responses. So I don't know.
That's true. Yeah, I guess it is a hard question that like to ask in terms of keeping yourself bound within the knowledge you knew at the time. You know what I mean? But I guess that's
You
the
know,
whole.
one thing I wished happened. Okay,
Okay.
sorry, this is a
No, no, no.
tangent,
Go
right?
ahead.
Well, I wish if we like hung out more in high school and like had like a podcast that would have been fun. But also, I really wish we had seen they just had a better friendship in high school and had watched the Monos trilogy. And then somehow I wish I had you for that like person presentation because the whole thing would have been like Monos themed. And that sounds like it would send.
Would they have let us do a Monos presentation?
They don't know what it is. They don't want to prove it beforehand.
Hands. It's all about hands.
I just like walk up. My gift to you is like a Snuggie with like hands on it.
Oh my gosh.
It would have been everything.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe we should add context. The person project was just like you were paired up with another person who you may or may not have known well. And you did like a PowerPoint presentation and you made something for them. Just as context for people out there, because you're like the person project, and like that could be like a nonprofit. Yeah. Like I don't know what that means. So that's what it means.
Was. Yeah, it was a lot of. It was actually a lot of work. Like you had to like write a poem about them, like a haiku about them.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with the person project looking back. Yeah, I don't know. Advice to give yourself. It's hard to say because like it was fight or flight for me. So like. Just stick it out, stick through it, and it'll be over.
Yeah. I don't know. I stand by mine. Just like don't care a lot about like hanging out with certain individuals or like going to do things. I mean, eventually I got there to the point senior year, so like good for me. But like
it's a bad sign when I'm encouraging somebody to go hang out with somebody.
You did though.
I did.
So several times. It's several events. So thank you for that, Jeremy. I'm so glad you were trying to force me to go to those events.
I mean, you're very welcome. I hope the tone translates, which is obvious sincerity on both ends. We remember such events fondly.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's just like a timeline, you know? Like I ignore him for half a year. He repays me by telling me to go to every single event with our friend group.
See, I was just trying to get you involved in the community.
Oh my God. Is this going to circle back into your stupid newspaper thing? Like the amount of times Jeremy dragged me into stuff that I didn't want to be in is a lot. Okay. And they were always like academic stuff that I like didn't want to be in. He was like, no, you should do this. Like some seminars. Ruby,
how are the extracurricular things that I dragged you into? Academic activities. I want to know that.
No. I'm saying I was talking about your newspaper thing. I was talking about the newspaper and then Socratic seminars that we had where you were like, Ruby, what do you think about this? And I'm still processing the question. And I hear my name and I'm like, oh no.
Because you just sit there because the idea was we were graded based off how many times we talked. And she would just sit there and not say anything. I'd be like, okay, there's only 5 minutes left. I don't want her to get a 0. So I'll just pass questions to her. It'll be great. And then I could tell they annoyed you, and like I cared that it annoyed you at first, and then I got to the point where I did not care. I'm just like, I'm gonna help her. Force questions her way, get the grade.
He did not care. Like one time, our teacher was gone, and so he had like another student and him like in charge of the Socratic seminar, and I knew I should be worried at that point because now you can see it on paper how many times like I haven't talked.
Maybe neither of us found our niche in high school because we didn't have any of these iconic clips that were present in our movie for the week. So the movie this week, which I will take blame for, I chose, was The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini, a movie from 1966. Okay, before we get into the plot, right? If you had to describe the genre of this movie to someone, how would you do so?
It's a horror mystery musical. That's the best I've got. In terms of genre.
It's very interesting because some of the genre, if you notice, if you go from website to website, is not consistent. So like I just searched it on Google, right? And it says comedy/fantasy.
Like so, this is a disclaimer, not even a disclaimer. This is just a warning, right? Or maybe just a preface. As the audience, right, you hear the title, The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. So logically, you're thinking, oh, this movie is going to be about a ghost in an invisible bikini. Mm-hmm. She is a secondary character, maybe. She's more like a narrator, not even a narrator.
She's not a narrator
that much.
She just kind of like does things.
She's there.
So yeah, the movie opens, right? And we think it's Little Red Riding Hood walking towards her grandmother's house, but it's not. It's the invisible bikini woman in flesh form, ? who goes and greets another man who has awoken from his casket and is having his inheritance allocated to family members in the near future. So she's sort of there to help facilitate whatever good deed he wants to do or whatever deed he wants to do. And if he does a good deed, then they, which is again, there all these movies have a they or a them that are never defined. They are going to grant him youth in eternal life. So that's how the movie opens, right? And honestly, I thought this was going to be a horror movie or like a Clue-like movie, just based off of that.
Well, it starts on like it's a stormy night. It's like this old castle. It felt very much like Clue meets like Agatha Christie novel.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't mad at it.
Yeah, no, it was good. I mean, I liked the premise that they set up. The way they delivered it throughout the movie, though, was a little like, I don't know if I'm watching the same movie.
Right. I think if the tone had stayed this way, I would have thoroughly enjoyed it. So that happens, right? And then we kind of cut to the scene where there are family members that are going to get inheritance, right? And they're performing a seance of sorts to talk to the man who had died and then arisen, right? It's kind of confusing, but essentially they're trying to talk to him via a seance. And
right.
The invisible bikini woman is then in the she's also blue when she's invisible. She turns into a Smurf, essentially. She turns into a Smurf blue and wreaks havoc. So the seance happens and she drops a chandelier on the group with her invisible bikini powers.
Right. Well, to me, that all felt like one sequence. Like, it didn't feel like there was a shift in the tone the movie was taking until after that scene. But because like they have the seance and then she drops the chandelier on them and they're kind of freaked out and there's like a note that they're given. I don't remember what the note says.
The note is along the lines of, it was a clue to where they can find the inheritance. That's our main plot, right? Should we then dive into like subplots that are then happening?
Right. So that's the thing. There's a main plot throughout this whole movie, which is the inheritance. It's finding the inheritance is a baseline plot that's throughout the whole movie. Right. But as the movie goes along, there are multiple different subplots that are introduced and they're taking place at the same time. So the first plot that happens after this like chandeliers drop and they get this note is all of a sudden the woman who's like doing the seance like looks out the window, or she opens the door and there's just like what is the name, like a bus of just like three, not even like one teen beach movie, no, like three of them. Like the cast of 3 teen beach movies rolls up in a bus and they go and greet this woman and she's like, oh, this is my nephew? I think it's nephew. And so all of a sudden these beach people are here and they just like go to the pool because there's a pool on the side of this like creepy old house. And it just turns into a beach movie for a couple of seconds. You know, they have their guitar out, there's a band, they start dancing by this pool. So, I mean, picture this like old spooky house in the middle of nowhere with just these people partying like they were on the beach.
It's very odd. A pool party at a haunted mansion. So it very much was like. And just like Nancy Sinatra walking around singing. I'm like, all right. Sure.
And mind you, like everybody stays in costume according to the like niche that they're in. So like the people who are like the heirs and the person who's doing the seance, they're in like kind of, I don't know, just like suits or nice outfits. And then like these beach people are just in like bikinis and bathing suits. So the whole time it's just like mixing genres. So the next thing that happens is they kind of come out and greet all the beach people like by the pool. But then we're introduced to one character who I think Jeremy really wants to describe because he just loved her eyewear so much.
Oh my gosh. So the daughter of, the main antagonist of the movie, I need to give this preface, is a lawyer who is trying to steal the inheritance from all the heirs by eventually killing them. So his daughter, he was going to have kill one of the heirs. And her eyewear, it's like glasses, but they're like, say you have like circles, right? Like the lenses are circles. It's like you bisected the circle in half to where it's only the bottom half of the circle, to where the frame of the actual lens goes right over where you would look with your eye. There's no way she can see anything. What happens is she keeps continually trying to kill the heir throughout the whole movie, but then is always thwarted by her taking off her glasses to try to look more sensual, I guess. And then she just like thinks that random items are humans.
One of the weirdest scenes, she tries to like seduce this guy inside the castle. And so like this whole interaction is her like trying to seduce him and like poison his drink. But then he like walks away and she ends up like poisoning a knight statue.
Costume?
Like just like it was just like something that was like, it looked like a display of like the knight's armor and everything. Mm-hmm. But then it starts moving. And so that was weird. She does like this whole musical number.
She does, yeah.
Very interesting. Also this whole castle is like you said, they had a budget for this.
They did. It was a nice set.
I described it like if Pottery Barn had a Harry Potter collection is as accurate, honestly, because that's exactly what this castle looked like. Mm-hmm. That was a whole thing throughout the movie, though. Like she constantly tries to like kill him, but then is always thwarted because she can't see anything. So
yeah, it's humorous, but I don't understand the logistics of how it actually works. Another subplot, in addition to the beach people who, by the way, are just partying essentially the entire time, is which one do we do first? I believe the first one we see are a traveling circus. Yeah. With
circus. No. Air quotes circus, because they had one animal which was a gorilla named Monstro.
I love how you remember that name. I did not remember that name. So we need to preface this by saying
it was problematic.
Very problematic. What would you call it? It's not blackface because the person was painted as a Native American. It was appropriation.
Cultural appropriation to like the highest degree. Yeah. It was so bad.
It was like to the point where it was just like he took upon a quote unquote Native American accent and speech pattern, which was hyper cringe because it was like, okay, this is questionable. But he's there. He's one of the circus quote unquote leaders. And then he's also with someone who looks like she's from My Dream of Jeannie.
I was thinking the exact same thing. That's exactly how I described it to myself in my head.
Oh, really?
I don't understand what like because I don't know, because you see this like circus looking like thing on the back of their truck, but then it's like Native American and then like Genie. So I don't know how that was supposed to be like circus.
I don't know, but we see a scene of them just driving straight into a lake, right? And then in the same scene...
No. Actually, they're driving down a road. And, so they're driving down a road and we're introduced to them. We also don't know what animal they have in the back there. We just see like the box. And then it pans to this group of bikers enter like another niche of people. And they crash through a billboard, which it's told that like that's what they've been doing. That's like their new game. Is like crashing through billboards because their leader's like, yeah, this is fun. And they are the first ones. One of them goes straight into the lake. And then we pan back to the circus and they do the exact same thing.
You're right. That's the correct order. Yep. So we were both concerned when it happened, like, is the animal drowning? How do they get the animal out of the carriage or cart that they were driving?
Animals. Because I thought there was multiple animals in there.
Yeah,
at that point.
Yeah, I don't know.
The confusing thing was this biker, they were like making fun of him and it seemed like, okay, he can swim, he's swimming, until like one of the bikers is like, I didn't know you could swim. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, I can't. And then like is drowning all of a sudden.
Yeah. I think maybe that's like comedy, but it was delivered in a very weird way. There are some intermediate scenes that don't really matter. Essentially what happens is both the circus and the bikers end up at the mansion somehow. The bikers were following the circus, I believe. It was
right. Well, yeah, but it's interesting because so the lawyer guy, the main antagonist of this movie, he hired the people from the circus to kill the heirs, I think, or help him find the money, maybe both. And so another thing that's to be said about this house is that there are a lot of like secret passageways that are like
Oh
made
yeah.
known throughout the movie. So that's how like when the bikers arrive, they see this lawyer and this circus, the two, like the Native American and the genie, they go into like the side secret passageway and they follow. So now in this house, you have the heirs, the circus, then you also have bikers, and they're all together in the house at the same time. The beach people, because eventually it rains, everybody scatters indoors. So that's kind of when the movie takes another shift, is when they're all inside the house now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tonal shifts, while they were abrupt, were easier to take when everybody was in separate locations, even if they were close to another. When they all entered the house, the tonal shifts were insane. It went from being like horror to comedy to beach movie, like instantaneously, and it was very strange.
The West Side Story.
Really, yeah, to really the West Side Story. And then,
I mean, there was a bunch of hijinks that ensues because so you have these people in the house. At some point, the animal, we find out as the audience, is a gorilla named Monstro, and he escapes, and then he's also in the house.
Yes, he somehow recognizes to go indoors and then begins wreaking havoc upon some of the beach dwellers for no reason. So it gets even more confusing when eventually the gorilla kidnaps one of the beach dwellers and somehow finds its way to an basement, question mark,
a
dungeon of horror and terror.
Right, because we weren't even introduced to this location previous to any of this. So somehow this gorilla just stumbles along like this dungeon. And then all of a sudden there are people there who this was hard to figure out. Like, because some of them were mannequins. And then other times they were like alive and moving like mannequins. So
it was very strange. Well, the ones that were actually alive were previous characters that were introduced, and they were there to try to kill off the heiresses and the heirs, right? But the part that confused me more, the mannequins really only began moving after the gorilla interacted with them and like looked at them. And so I didn't know if the gorilla somehow had like a magical power to make the mannequins come to life, or like,
I think so.
Well, how does that work then? Because they weren't moving till the gorilla came up and walked.
They were already disguised as mannequins, like they weren't actually mannequins. The only confusing time I
had
is when
mannequins.
The bikers come in, but some of them weren't. Were they? I thought they were just dressed up to like as this facade of, oh, I'm a mannequin, and then they were like there to like attack people. But I think that like one of the point the bikers come and they try to rescue this girl, and like they take this one person's head off and it's just a mannequin head. So I was very confused as to like what this was supposed to be. That was never explained either. It was just like that happened. Next scene.
Basically what happened next was because the gorilla took one of the heiresses down there. She eventually ends up being tied to a log and being put onto a conveyor belt that like, what would be the terminology that you would use? It
saws her in half.
Tries to saw her in half, I guess. And there's this whole fight scene between some of the beach dwellers who are trying to, well, everyone, but it's like the beach dweller boy, I don't know what age they were supposed to be, but they were trying to save her, but then they were fighting the lawyer and who the lawyer hired to kill him. So it was this it was a prolonged scene of like them pushing her towards the saw, pushing her away from the saw, pushing her towards the saw, pushing her away from the saw.
Right. And this is everyone. You have the gorilla, you have the bikers, you have the beach people, all in one place. And eventually they stop it. And I mean, they kind of, they finally find out that like the heir's money is like, they were looking for a Cupid statue, and then the arrow was supposed to like shoot up, and then the money like drops on the ground. So it's a little bit unclear at the end whether the heirs receive the money or it's the people like the circus and the bikers who also had a claim to that as well. It was very unclear.
Yeah, it was not resolved very well because it's like all the money is in $100 bills because it was like $1 million, and I'm like, okay, but it's a group of 8 people that are surrounding this money. Who gets the money? You know, does the lawyer get some of the money? Because the lawyer is still alive, right? I don't know.
Right. And it's like, okay, well, what happens now? What about the Teen Beach people? They just showed up. Like, are they going to want some?
Maybe.
And they do save the girls, so that's great, but nothing else is ever explained. It's just like, okay, she's safe, the money's here, the end.
No, no,
And
not the
not
end.
even the end.
Not the
Like,
end.
you're
Oh,
talking
no,
about the
no, no,
dance
no,
scene?
no. There's a scene before the dance scene because the resolve, if you remember, is where we pan back to the castle where the guy who died is, and then the genie, not the genie, I'm getting the genie mixed up with the invisible bikini woman. The ghost of the invisible bikini and the old guy are there in the castle. She's like, "You have done your good deed. Now you will be similar in age to me, so we can live forever in the afterlife." And then they make him like 12 years old. And so that's sort of like
Right.
something. And then they pan back to another beach
Well,
musical scene.
then
That's the
she's like, "Oh yeah,
progression.
you can't have everything," and then it just randomly pans back to like like all of a sudden in this dungeon where everybody was fighting, everybody's just like on top of everything, like in true Teen Beach fashion. Just like music is playing, they're all dancing on top of stuff. Every single person you can think of, every single like niches all together, and that's how the movie ends.
That is how the movie ends. Very
This is a 3 out of
confusing.
10 for me.
Is it? I hadn't even gotten there yet, but
I was so aggravated. The more the movie went on, the more aggravated I got because like okay, if this was like a plot with a lot of subplots, but it still somehow flowed into one plot, it would be
mhm.
like, okay. But a lot of times it's like they added these subplots where the subplots had plots of themselves. And
Yeah.
I was like so confused the whole time. I don't, it's 3 out of 10.
Interesting. I think I'm going to give the movie more credit. I'm going to go with a 6 out of 10 because I'll admit there are parts of this movie that made me laugh really hard. And I do think the movie is worth watching because it's almost unbelievable in terms of the tonal shifts of the movie. So I reaped maybe more amusement out of it than you did. I didn't have many issues with the plot, I don't think. My issues were with the abrupt tonal changes, especially after they entered the house.
I
Because
think
they,
that makes it send more. I could have taken if the plot had made sense. I think it sends to have those like abrupt tonal changes for me. It's so funny. You're in like West Side Story, and then all of a sudden it's like Teen Beach movie. Like what?
it, no, for me, they went from being like funny to being more confusing in terms of tonal shifts. I thought the movie was self-aware. Maybe this is what happened. I thought the tonal shifts were because they were self-aware of the movie they were making towards like the beginning, like the first half. I thought, oh, they get it. They get that they're making this weird piece of cult kind of, camp movie, whatever you want to call it. But then by the end, it felt like the shifts were more frantic to try to resolve the plots. And so it didn't, I began questioning, even if it was just sort of like in the back of my mind, if they were really self aware of the kind of film they were making. And that's where, for me, it started to kind of crumble, especially like the last half hour or so when they were like the main fight scene happens and they were trying to like resolve everything. That's when, for me, I'm like, okay, this movie could have been everything. And then now it's just kind of like there are only parts of the movie that I think are really funny.
If you're someone who's like deeply invested in plots and stuff like that, maybe skip this one
Yeah, I
because
think that's fair.
but for what it is, it's definitely a movie I'm never gonna forget. And I low key would love like if that I wish that was like an actual like location, an actual house that they like filmed at because I would love a tour of that house. The locations were everything, but also like our standards weren't very high considering our locations for the last couple ones were like CGI background or Manos in El Paso. Well
Velocipaster in a
done,
backyard.
being like China.
China.
So
True. Yeah. We saw an actual
so
set and we're like, wow,
I mean, it's very true though.
it is kind of true.
It's very accurate. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know. It was okay, But if you want to watch it, if it's your thing, go for it. It could be fun.
Yeah. So I guess that is our movie review of The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. So I guess we'll transition into our normal ending segment where we read from our books of choice. Do you have your book prepared or
Right.
what are you doing this time around?
Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Roderick Rules.
Oh, you're returning to the canon of Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
This is going to be interesting. I'll go
Okay.
first.
All right, go for it.
Let's just see what I land on. Interesting. So, but with Roderick knocked out with the flu, they must have seen their big chance. So after mom gave us a speech about responsibility and trust and all that, they took off. So I guess this idea is his brother's sick and he's left in charge. And his parents are trusting him, maybe not to throw a party, things
So
like that.
what
So
advice do you have for people with that?
always be a trustworthy person. I feel like that's a good message,
Yeah. Look at Diary of a Wimpy Kid. The last few times you've pulled from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, you've gotten profound messages from Roderick herself. So
Himself?
no, Roderick is an icon. Roderick is a diva. Roderick is her. You're
Is
not
that the
convinced?
intro line for him in Diary of a Wimpy Kid? Like, who is this character?
It's like you go to Wikipedia and you look up the character description, and that's the character description. Roderick
Right.
is
Although I will say, for those of you listening, like I was never a big fan of like the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, like live action movies they made. But one scene, I think it's in like the first or second Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Roderick performs a like version of Justin Bieber's Baby. It's like a heavy metal version. And that
awful.
scene is iconic. It is iconic. Okay. So if you should look it up, go watch it. It's amusing. It's so funny. Yeah.
Interesting. I am pulling from this Bible. So we'll see what I land on. Okay.
Tell us, Jeremiah.
I keep landing. This is okay. All books of the Bible are worthy and equal. I'll preface it with that. I keep landing on these useless books that nobody has read. So
I love the backpedal from all of them are useful, but this one's useless.
Hosea, a book that I don't believe.
Is that supposed to be a confirmation that that's an actual book of the Bible? The way you said it, like that's one of them, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's in here, so it's got to be. I landed on Hosea 7 verses 6 and 7. And I'm worried that Hosea is actually the precursor to 50 Shades of Grey. So let me read the verses and then
I don't like where this is going.
Neither do I, but it's what happened. And I'm not really willing to budge and find a different verse considering I'm trying to remain with some integrity with what I land on. So we'll just go with this.
You have to read it in character. Yeah, we need Jeremiah for this, not Jeremy, okay?
Oh, okay.
Resume the persona of Jeremiah the prophet.
I'll just add a southern accent, it'll be fine. Their hearts are like an oven. They approach him with intrigue. Their passion smolders all night. In the morning, it blazes like a flaming fire. There's a fire again. All these people with fire in the Bible. Yeah. Anyway, all of them are hot as an oven. Seems unsafe, but okay. They devour their rulers. All their kings fall, and none of them calls on me. Okay.
So what is your advice?
Sometimes intimate discussions can lead to political upheaval, and you just have to go with the flow. There's my advice.
I'm so sorry. Jeremiah the prophet is nowhere to be found.
I don't know how to turn that into, other than like, if you're as hot as an oven, that means you probably are running a fever. So then like take some Tylenol. I don't know. You're welcome.
Jeremy Petosa, college graduate, age 23. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom.
I have a master's degree and that is the best I can come up with.
Also, you would think years at being at like a Christian school, you would somehow be able to like turn that into something very like deep and meaningful. And somehow all we got was, if you're hot, take Tylenol.
Where were these verses in Bible classes too? I don't remember this being taught in Bible.
I want to know where Jeremiah is.
Maybe Jeremiah's in Cancun with his kids.
Oh, well, how dare he?
That's a reference to Ted Cruz, everybody, if you didn't get that. I don't actually have just like kids living in Cancun. But if they had fevers, I would tell them to take Tylenol just to like wrap it all around, you know?
Yeah, your advice wasn't that great this time, but like my advice is good enough for the both of us.
Wow. Rude. That's emotional abuse. How dare you? No, I'm kidding.
The way you said that with no inflection in your voice. Get ready to cast us for all the roles, Hollywood. We're here to make remakes of anything you want. Also, if you want us to start infomercials, like, absolutely. Especially if they're talking about like
where are you going with that?
Social security numbers or strutting it.
Yeah. You could follow. That's a good look at you kind of like tying it into our, go follow our TikTok. There's a video on there where I took a video of an HSN employee or presenter claiming that you don't need your social security number until you're 24 or 25.
Follow our TikTok.
Follow our
whatever TikTok our TikTok handle is.
Everything is Tine. Come on now.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. You know, it's because I don't know this because he made our Twitter handle at everything Tine. So now I just like make sure that it's not something different. But yes, our Twitter handle is at everything Tine and our Instagram is at everything is Tine. So go check that out.
YouTube. We also post stuff to YouTube. So can do that too.
Yes.
And we're going to start expanding probably our videos. Expanding our videos where we're actually like, you can see us on there too. So.
Yeah, and we're just going to talk about like random topics. So, you know, if you ever have like a topic that you want us to talk about, like let us know.
Yeah.
And we can do like a quick video on that topic and you'll be able to see all of our reactions.
Sounds like a plan. Well, I guess we should sign off and we will see everybody, see is a very relative term because it's a audio file that's uploaded to a program. We will experience life in some respect with you, audience, at some point next week. I don't know how else to phrase it. Have a good week, everyone.
Yeah, what he said.
Bye-bye.